Okay, Matt, so do you think a donkey is more of a horse or a pony? Like, where does a donkey even fit? You know, they're kind of like zebras. Like, where do they go?
I'm gonna go with pony.
Why?
Because I don't think you ride donkeys or ponies, right? But you ride a horse.
I mean, I think you can ride them. You definitely shouldn't
I
because
think kids
you're
can
a
ride ponies.
massive
If I rode a donkey, my feet would be on the ground.
100%. Welcome to the Leadr Pulse podcast, the podcast with actionable insights for leaders revolutionizing the world of work. In today's episode, you get to hear from Chris Heaslip, our co-founder and executive chairman here at Leadr, and Geoff Lewis, who is the founder of Bedrock and is also one of our investors here at Leadr. Geoff and Chris unpack what it looks like to really trust your team members more as they reflect in their previous experience as leaders, as well as the danger of putting our identity in the success of others. So let's take a listen to Chris and Geoff.
In this vein, like you've kind of defined, hey, we're not VC, because just being a VC, investing money to make more money to kind of, buy another house or whatever, like, that's not a really transcendent mission. Like, how do you reframe that for your team and for people interacting with you? Because I think you don't only just believe this, like you've done it at Bedrock.
Thank you. Yeah, like our ethos is the world really doesn't need more venture capital firms. Venture capital is a profession where you're not really building anything yourself. You're a provider of financing to entrepreneurs like you. You, Chris, are a builder. You're building organizations. You have teams. I'm not a builder. I mean, I've built Bedrock, but I'm not an entrepreneur building and operating an operating company in the world. And I think that one of the issues with venture capitalists is because you're not actually building a company, but you're in close proximity to folks who are, by virtue of like what you're doing, giving them capital, sometimes serving on the board of directors, advice, etc. You can get into a dynamic with the entrepreneurs where you as an investor are trying to self-actualize through their businesses, which can lead to you being, frankly, really annoying and actually destroying value as opposed to helping to build value. Like if you're trying to leech off of the journey of an entrepreneur or like be parasitic for your own personal brand off of the hard work of an entrepreneur and their team, that's, I think, very unhealthy spiritually as a human for a VC. I think it's very unhealthy for the organization. And so we've just put a line in the sand from sort of day one here of our ethos is, yes, we are technically venture capitalists, like we are making investments in technology companies, but we don't call ourselves that. We're investors. We aren't about status. We aren't about self-actualizing the companies. We are just about trying to find the very few entrepreneurs on the planet who we believe are going to be building companies that are truly going to make the world better, that are authentically mission-driven, and be providers of capital to them. And that's our ethos here.
That's incredible. I mean, something you've described there as a leader, it can't be easy to not attach your own self-worth to the success of your entrepreneurs, because that's kind of what you're effectively describing is, look, I backed this entrepreneur, look how great I am. But as you're saying, the entrepreneur's doing the work. And I think there's a lesson there for every leader about humility, and by being the provider of capital to entrepreneurs who don't need anything from the entrepreneur in return, that puts you in a category of one, essentially.
Thank you. Yeah, there's this old saying passed down in my extended family of if you give a donkey money, it's still a donkey. And what I pulled away from that is it's still just a donkey. And what I pulled away from that is really, I think as an investor, you want to be self-actualizing through things outside of your work. And
Right.
our mission at Bedrock is very focused on entrepreneurs pursuing unique N of one missions of their own. We're obviously trying to generate exceptional returns for our underlying investors, but the money is not why we're in business, which I think is different from the.
You described it in a recent interview. You said there's probably only about a dozen people who can do what you do, or people who can back, truly generational companies. Why do you think that is?
It's so much about in the earliest days where we're getting involved, it's really about underwriting the human beings starting the businesses and really understanding them as people, what makes them tick, how they're going to self-actualize in the world through their mission with the company they're trying to build. And in order to do that effectively, it's kind of like part psychologist, part finance, part having a vision of like the future and figuring out whether this product is going to serve an end market that's going to be a lot bigger in the future, part private investigator of kind of learning about all the different pieces of how this entrepreneur or set of entrepreneurs is going to put things together. So it's kind of like polymathic. It's very interdisciplinary. It's not something that you can really learn in a classroom. It's something that you have to sort of learn really through just being exposed to lots of different entrepreneurs and having a high EQ, which not many people in finance have. I think finance generally tends to attract somewhat mercenary, robotic, derivative people. And so there aren't that many folks who are drawn to venture capital who also have this incredible EQ and ability to understand other people, empathize with them, really put yourself in their place, that also then have the ability to do what we try to do here, which is say, you know what, we're not going to self-actualize from this investment. We're going to step back. We're going to let this entrepreneur and this team do their thing. And I think that's kind of the formula you need to be one of the very best venture capitalists. So there just aren't that many people that have that.
That's leadership 101 right there, right? Is like, hey, you can't arrive at backing the next Apple or SpaceX or just through analysis on a spreadsheet. There's a lot of other things that go into it. And I think a lot of leaders make that mistake of saying, here's my plan of how to go from A to B on a spreadsheet, but there's real life people involved in actually helping make the plan work. And there's a lot of complexity and, you, as a leader, you can't just kind of boil it down to, black and white. There's a lot of challenges along the way. Let me ask you this, we're at time here, but Geoff, going back to Geoff 20 years ago, stepping into a startup, what advice would you give yourself as a leader back then on how to lead people more effectively?
Yeah, I think that erring on the side of high trust is actually the way to lead. Is you have to actually trust and empower the people on your team. And if people mess up, you have to give people chances to course correct. You have to give clear feedback. And then ultimately, if things aren't working, you have to unfortunately let folks go. And that's part of being a leader. But starting out with a foundation of trust, like when you've made a decision of bringing someone onto your team, imbuing that person with trust is really important. And I think when I was younger, I had maybe some trust issues, maybe that trace back to my childhood. It was hard for me to trust people. And I could have actually been more trusting than I was early on.
That's incredible advice. Well, Geoff, thank you so much for your generosity and sharing your story with us. And we will chat again soon.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Always a pleasure.
So my takeaway from Chris and Geoff's conversation were two things. One, identity as a leader.
Yeah.
I mean, he talked specifically about being a VC, but I was thinking of so much of my own story in that. And then two, trust, which are so related. Like what we find our identity in is what causes us to trust or not trust people or things. So he used, speaking of donkeys, he used this quote of like, if you give donkey, was it money, then it's still a donkey. Yeah. So I'm curious to hear from you as he unpacked that whole concept of our identity as a leader. Do you agree with that about like, if you give a donkey money, it's still a donkey, or what do you think?
Yeah, it's just a rich donkey now, right?
Yeah, it's just a rich donkey. I guess depending on how much money you gave it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Or a poor donkey, but it's still a donkey.
Mm.
I heard this story once from Kevin O'Leary, one of the old Shark Tank investors guys, and he said, anytime I'm looking at a company, I want to meet the founder or the executive team, and I ask them, how many hours do you work a week? And he said it tricks people a lot because he said anytime people respond with, I just work or I'm a workaholic, he's like, I almost never invest into that company. So he trips up a lot of people because I think you'd think a shark is asking you to say, oh, I give my entire life to this. He says the best leaders that respond to that question say something like, "Oh, I'm a huge art fiend. I love painting in the evenings and the weekend, or I'm pulling together like a originals Harry Potter book collection, and I'm becoming obsessed with that world at the moment." Or he's like people that are picking up jujitsu or mountain biking. He's like, I want to know that my identity of my founders and my executive team aren't wrapped up in what they do, that they have a pursuit outside of this, because those are the people that don't burn out. And as someone that has spent 7 years of their life where their entire identity and community and life was wrapped around what I did, I know exactly what that feels like. And so as Geoff is sharing that, I'm remembering that story from Kevin O'Leary and thinking, if he ever bounces into me on the street, I'm not going to tell him I work the hours that I work, and I do want to work more on finding the hobbies and the things outside of Leadr as well. But I think it's so easy for us that love to work, that love what we do, where our entire being becomes consumed, and I don't think that's healthy. I really don't. And that's coming from a CEO. Like, I truly believe that, and I try and communicate that to my team as well.
Yes, it is. I mean, I'm the same way. Whenever someone's like, what are your hobbies? I'm like, work.
Right.
But, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
But because I do enjoy, and I'm lucky that I do truly enjoy working and enjoy my work, but,
Right.
and I know that I'm so much better in my work when I have those things that I'm focused on outside
Yeah.
of work. So such a good reminder.
And I don't want to come across like we've got it all figured out. So here's a funny example. We have a Slack channel at Leadr called PTO Like a Boss.
Yep.
Which is, we really want to encourage people to vacation well. So people will come back from their vacations and they'll post their photos of them with their family or the trip that they did. And they'll talk about how they switched off and they deleted Slack or they deleted emails and they were really focused on the vacation. But to prove to you that we haven't got it all figured out, the executive team's got another Slack channel. Do you know where I'm going with this, Holly?
Oh yeah. I was like, where is he going with this? And now, yeah, it's called PTO-ish.
PTO-ish. And so it's photos of the executive team, of our spouses taking photos of us with our phone while on vacation, or our laptop while on vacation, or like preparing board slides or spreadsheets while on vacation. And so it's like we're almost undercutting all the authority that we have on this subject, but we are trying diligently to separate our identity from what we do. But it's flipping hard, especially when you love it.
Yes, it really, really is.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can just so relate to the identity and trust thing. A few episodes ago, I got real vulnerable and kind of shared my story of here at Leadr, leading the sales team and then giving it back to you and how hard that was. And what I learned through that process, because I worked with a couple of executive coaches, I was like, why is this not working? I was so frustrated that I wanted to get outside perspective on it.
Yeah.
So I took this 360 assessment. I highly recommend it. It's a company called Integris. They do a 360 assessment where you get different people. I think I had 4 people. Yeah, it was you and then 3 people that worked on my team at the time it's so funny because it's so simple. You're literally just picking adjectives. They show you like, I don't know, 8 pages of adjectives, and you click the ones that you feel like describe me, and you do it about yourself as well. And then you kind of see, where did you rank yourself in that category compared to how others perceive you. And it was so eye-opening, because what it does is it presents what they call constraints. And what I really love about their perspective is that your constraints are overused strengths. So I'm gonna say that again, because I know those words sound very similar. Your constraints are overused strengths.
It's good.
So the things that hold you back are often the best of you. It's just you're overusing them. And that was absolutely me leading the sales team. So the ones that rose to the top for me was urgency and intensity. So It is true. For me, almost everything is urgent. I want things done now. I often feel like I need to do things now. I am a very impatient person. And I think we talked about that a few episodes ago too. You were like, what did you say? I'm patient. I'm growing in my patience. I told them that it didn't have to happen tonight, just needed to happen in the morning or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. No,
Yeah.
and well, like a year ago, I stopped using end of day. I was like, the end of day is not very nice. We're not going to do end of day anymore. It's not due end of day. It's due end of night.
Yeah. End of night. Yeah. Give you a couple more hours. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the urgency part. And then the
Yes.
intensity part is I do have so much passion and I care so much, but that can come across as being too intense for a lot of personalities.
Yeah.
And so anyway, what I realized was, first of all, I inherited the team. So I assumed that I had trust with the team. That was one of my first learnings.
Mm.
You've shared before, Matt, that when you inherited the sales team at your former organization you were with, you sat down and did one-on-ones with every single person. I have heard you give that talk like 1 million times. And what did I do when I inherited the sales team here? The opposite of that. I did not sit down and do one-on-ones with every person because I was like,
They know you.
they know me. Like,
Yeah.
they know I have their best intention in mind. Like, yes, I'm intense, but they know that it's just because I'm passionate.
Right.
No, I should have still sat down with every person for at least 30 minutes, asked them how they were doing, what they would change if they were me, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't do that. And so the trust piece that Geoff talks about is huge.
Yeah.
And then kind of how I shared on that other episode, but I was I was striving to find my identity in earning that promotion, that it really caused my urgency intensity to even get worse, like intensify
Mhm.
even more, which healthy Holly is already urgent and intense enough. We don't need that even worse. So yeah, that I came across like a micromanager. That was the feedback that I got a lot from the team, that I was too in the weeds. I came across like a micromanager and wasn't letting people have the freedom to do their best work because I was trying so hard to control everything. So that was a learning
Yeah.
for me of what Geoff is talking about your identity as a leader and wishing, like he said, that he had trusted his people more. I can totally relate to that.
I have very similar tendencies. When I am strung out, when I haven't rested outside of work, or if that's now translating into like a lack of trust within the workplace, my response, certainly urgency is one of them, but I become, someone's described me as you become a sledgehammer, not a scalpel. And so I become blunt to the point of abrasive, just not nice. And I also cover my comments with sarcasm and humor. And so I will, when I'm really frustrated about something, I'll make everything a joke because it's kind of my way of like my defense mechanism of handling it. And I have this silly saying that I tell myself all the time, if you're not laughing, you're crying. And so like if I'm really in a pit of despair, I'll brush over everything. And that actually erodes trust. It doesn't build trust. And so that aspect, this stuff might sound like kumbaya and trust falls. It really isn't. It's all about team cohesiveness. It's all about engaging in healthy, not unhealthy conflict. And I think what we're talking about is when you fall into these tendencies, you're engaging in unhealthy conflict, which is not what we're describing at all.
Absolutely. No, and yeah, to your point about like trust falls and stuff, I mean, the reason why it's so critical to performance is, I mean, I'll just speak for myself, the story I just told. I noticed our top performers on the team were like disengaging because I was coming across too much like a micromanager, and they were like frustrated, and so
Right.
it directly impacts performance, because when we don't trust our people, especially high performers, they are not going to stick around, much less be engaged if they
No.
feel like they're being micromanaged or controlled. So
So true,
it
Holly.
has a direct impact on performance.
So true, Holly. And you know that this that there's something to this because it's being shared from Geoff, who's worked with hundreds of the best companies in the world.
Yeah.
All you have to do is go to his website, Bedrock, and see that their portfolio of organizations that they've worked with. and the credibility speaks for itself. Like, he's interfaced with so many successful entrepreneurs and companies, and for him to be able to articulate how much of a deal this is really important.
So true. So a couple quick actionable insights as we learned from Geoff. Number one, your identity cannot be tied to what you do. And so you and I both need to find some hobbies like stat.
Yeah, I know.
Well, maybe after our babies get, a
Yeah,
little...
yeah. My baby Ada is my hobby right now.
Yeah, exactly. And then the second one is trust your people more and really work on that. Why? Really dig in. Why do you not trust your people? What is it about you? Look in the mirror of how you can really foster more trust on your team. So good takeaways. I'm
Love
encouraged.
it.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Did you know that we send out a weekly email called Leadr Pulse? You can subscribe to it on our website, leadr.com. That's Leadr.com. It's got actionable insights for leaders revolutionizing the world of work. So if you're enjoying this podcast, check out our website and subscribe to our weekly email. Now, you also might not know that Matt and Chris, our co-founders, they wrote a book called Management is Dead. It's all about this topic of creating a revolution around the ROI of people development. You can check it out at managementisdead.com. You can order your copy anywhere books are sold, and make sure that you order it, read it with your team. It's jam-packed full of insights for you to be the best leader that you can be. We'll see you next time on the Leadr Pulse podcast.